world for sure. Okay, for those of you that are here, we'll start in about 3 minutes. About 3 minutes. Morning, Jeff. Okay. Well, I guess we will go ahead and get started. Oh, okay. I've got to wait 30 more seconds. I guess our watches are 30 seconds apart. Well, we don't have a very big number this morning, but hopefully we'll have a really good discussion anyway. So, just want to say thanks to Dad for teaching the last couple of weeks. I was able to listen. And we're live now. Our live stream was working really well the last couple of weeks, so I got to listen to both lessons, and they were both just great. And so we're going to continue on to the end of the year, which is not very far away, with this lesson or this theme of children's stories, the adult version. Have y'all enjoyed this a little bit? It's been kind of fun for me too to really dig in and do what we're trying to do here, and that's dig into the scripture deeper. And I think we've really talked about some great biblical figures, and I hope that we've learned some things from them as we've studied them. So this morning we're going to continue that, and we're going to study Noah. And so Noah's a big story, and a lot of people in this world think that's exactly what it is just a story. Of course, we know better. We know it's the truth because it's in the Bible and it's what God did. Bethany and I, of course, Dad pointed out that I was gone again. Thanks, Dad, for that little message. You didn't think I'd hear that, did you? But I picked up on it pretty quick. Anyway, while we were on our cruise, we thought about Noah quite a bit because we were on one big boat, I'll tell you. And we'll talk about that here in just a little while. But, so Noah, what do we know about Noah? First of all, let me read what we read our children. And I'm fortunate enough to get to do chapel at the preschool pretty regular, and Dad's been doing some of that too. And one of the things that I did this week was read a story, and I think Dad's been reading stories, hadn't you? When you come up here, I don't know what you read out of, but I read out of this exact book, and this was actually Colton's little Bible. It says it right in the front that this was Colton's Bible. I thought it might have the year in there, but it doesn't. So yeah, so this is what I read to the boys every night. And so I thought we would read about Noah, and I love the pictures and the depictions of how this works. But instead of calling it the Great Flood or Noah, the chapter is the first rainbow, which is really a positive thing, right? So many years passed after Adam and Eve left the garden. People began to forget about God. They began to do bad things. There was only one good man, and his name was Noah. And it shows Noah he's doing some woodwork there. Got his little chisel and his hammer and just doing some woodwork. Now he's got a great big map and a big elephant. God said, I am sorry that I made people. I will start all over again. God told Noah to build a big boat called an ark. God showed Noah exactly how to build it. When the ark was finished, God told Noah to put the animals in it. Noah obeyed God. He put some of every kind of animal into the ark. Then God shut the door. Soon rain began to fall. The raindrops made little puddles, then bigger puddles. The big puddles became streams, the rushing rivers, then sloshing seas. Soon the whole earth was covered with water. The ark tossed up and down on the waves, but Noah and his family and all the animals were safe and dry inside the ark. Then one day the rain stopped. Noah opened a window in the ark. He saw water everywhere. He sent a dove to fly out and look for land, but the dove came right back. It could not find a place to rest. The next time Noah sent the dove, it brought back an olive leaf. The water was going down. The next time the dove did not come back, it was time to leave the ark. The ark was resting on top of a mountain. Noah and his family and all the animals came out. Noah thanked God for keeping them safe. Then God put a dazzling rainbow in the sky. It was God's promise that water would never again cover the whole earth. What a great story, right? Pretty simple. But was there more to the story? There was a lot more to the story. So, what are some of the things, just before we get into our discussion, what are some of the things that we don't tell the kids when they're young about Noah? That he got inebriated? Okay. That's true. That's true. What else? That everybody dies? Yeah. Doesn't really point that out, does it, in the little story? What else? Yeah. Yeah. He had a little bit of turmoil going on, didn't he? I think people might have thought he was crazy. We don't talk about that too much either. What else? Those are all good things. But there's a lot more to the story than just the children's version. So if you're going to follow along this morning, this comes from Genesis, of course, 6 through 9. So it covers quite a bit of ground there. So we're going to start off and just kind of go the same way the Bible does. And Genesis 6 and 5 is kind of what I want to focus on. But let's start at the beginning. When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal, his days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. Verse 5. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Can you imagine? I mean, I know today our world is in pretty bad shape. But this says that every thought of men on earth. Can you imagine living in that time? I still think that we, especially as Christians, a single person is evil. All of you here are great people. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I didn't see y'all come in. Or I might not have made that statement. But this says that wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. I can't imagine living. Think about that God, who had made such a creation, who had made the Garden of Eden, who had given so much, and had a plan for man to really thrive on this earth. That's what he wanted to happen. And they were thinking evil all the time, and so God grieved. That's really, when we think deep about that, I don't think there's anything more sad than that. That our Creator, all God even today really wants from us is for us to love Him, right? I mean, the things that we do show other people and Him that we love Him, but really that's all He ever has wanted from us at all, is our love, freely, that we will to love Him. And that wasn't happening. So that's the circumstances of the entire earth at this time. Isn't that sad? It's really sad. And sometimes I think, how much more is He going to put up with us? You know, is He grieving right now that we're so bad, that the earth has become so evil that maybe He's not going to put up with it? So, one of the things starting in verse 9, we're going to talk a little bit about Noah. Oh, it mentions the Nephilim. I think we've talked about this a little bit. Who are the Nephilim? Do we know? Big people. We think that, we talked about this a little bit with David and Goliath. There's a real possibility that Goliath was a descendant of the Nephilim. Large, giant people. Says in the Bible, heroes of old. So I don't really understand how they came about being. I've looked before, and there's just really not a whole lot of conclusive things. But we know that they were real because it says it, and that they continued on as far as lineages go. Like I said, Goliath, and we discovered that Goliath had brothers that were probably of the same line. So yeah, that's who they were, and that's who he refers to in verse 4. But then he goes on in verse 9. And so let's talk a little bit about Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So everybody around Noah is evil. But Noah is good. He's righteous and blameless. Now, does that mean he was without sin? No, not at all. Not at all. I'm sorry? Right. That doesn't mean that he's sinless. It doesn't say that at all. But we do know that he had a great relationship with God. He walked with God, right? So I just wonder how difficult it was for Noah to remain righteous and to remain blameless in this time. How difficult is that? And then I got to thinking, well, how difficult is it for us? Because that's man. But how hard is it for us to do our best to stay righteous and blameless? It's kind of difficult sometimes. The society that we live in. But I think because of Noah and many others, but if we think about Noah, that ought to give us some confidence that we can do that too, right? Yes. So if you couldn't hear, Dad said that God gave Noah a job for 100 years. Kept him occupied. Kept him working. And so, yeah, that's a great point. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more of how that happened. But yes, so that's something that we learn at the end. But that is definitely something that we can learn from Noah is we got to stay busy. We got to be doing something, right? And I think that's an important part. Yes, ma'am. Right. Because that was already his nature, right? He was already that. More about that in my sermon this morning. And so that's one thing that he did. And it says here, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. All. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. So God's about to give him instructions, give him a blueprint of how to build the boat. And Noah says, you know what? I'm a carpenter, and I think there's a better way to do this. I think I can build this boat a lot faster, recruit more people, and do this differently than what God said. Oh, I see a lot of heads shaking. That's not at all what he said, is it? He listened intently, and in verse 22 it says, what? Noah did everything just as God commanded him. Not a little bit of it, not the way he thought it should be, but everything just the way God commanded him to do it. So I thought, what would that boat have looked like if he didn't do it the way God said? It would have, wouldn't it? Because God's intention was for him to do everything, but he did it. That's the point. God intends for us to follow what he says too. Yes, sir. Your question or your answer. So I'm trying really hard to kind of recap the question and the answer. So what Casey's saying is that is because we trust our Father so much that we're going to do exactly what he says. But my question for you is, when do we lose that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Right now. Right. Right. So that's a great point. We have to trust the Father. We have to trust the Father. And it is important for us to dig deep, but sometimes take it for face value. Take it for what it is. Because God's difficult for us, does he? He tells us it's not, that we're not going to have a hard time. But as far as learning goes, there's just so much more that we can learn. So that was an important part, is that he did exactly as he was commanded, not just a little bit of it. So let's go back and take a look at the make a roof for it and finish the ark to within 18 inches of the top. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower your wife and your son's wives with you. You're to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures. Okay, before we get into that discussion, just this boat that he's describing is huge. Yeah. How many of you have been there? Y'all have? And I knew Dad and Aunt Donna had gone. Anybody else? I want to go there. And I've heard that it's just truly amazing. And I've watched some videos on it, and because there's a lot of videos out there on YouTube about it. But one of the things that I was kind of wanting to know is, because we were on a giant boat last week, it's called the Harmony of the Seas, I thought it'd be kind of fun to compare what was then and what was now. And so as far as cost goes, even though they use modern technology, cranes and that kind of thing to build it, it cost $92 million. $92 million. Have any clue what it cost when Noah was building it, and he didn't have all those resources. Somehow they had to come to him. I mean, God just provided. That's just all there was to it. So it had, what did it say, 3 decks, right? 75 feet wide, 45 feet high. So I was going to look here. I was going to compare that to some of the statistics of the ship that we were on. So The capacity of the ship that we were on was 6,687 passengers. That's just passengers. 2,000 crew. So there's 8,000 people on this floating city. The length, 1,188 feet long. Average speed was 22 knots. 448 inside cabins. 2,299 outside cabins. I said the number of crew was 2,193. 17 decks. 17. That's a skyscraper in the earth, or floating on the ocean. A skyscraper. One of the things that was interesting to me was it weighs 226,000 tons. How does that float? So we actually went to it was a discussion with the captain, and it's the first time we'd ever done that. And he said, well, weight doesn't matter. What do you mean weight doesn't matter? He said, because of the natural forces. You know, he said, if you have buoyancy and you have gravity. And he said, weight doesn't matter. He said, they can be endless tonnage. It doesn't matter. How does that happen? And then this boat was 48 meters wide. So it's something called an Oasis class. Most cruise ships are 37 feet wide. So the stability of this thing was incredible. So much bigger than the ark. Yet God was able to get all these things on it. Yes, sir.
Well, you got to remember, amateurs built the ark, professionals built the Titanic.
Okay, that's a good point. Amateurs built the ark, but professionals built the Titanic. And which one sunk, right? Yeah, that's a good point, Ron. It sure is. So it doesn't really matter what technology does today. This is how God preserved what was left of his people, was like this. And yes, go ahead. Over 2,000. 8. I know. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? And we're going to talk about that too. Yeah. 75 feet? No. Okay. No, long. Right. Don't you teach math? No. But it is wide. I mean, and you're right. The width probably helped the stability of it, but that really didn't matter. Yes, sir. Yeah. They are. Ratio-wise, you're correct. Yeah. I mean, God knew. But it's just interesting at the size of it when you start really analyzing that, and then the things that he put on there. So besides the 8 people, 2 of every kind of bird, of every kind of animal, of every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. I don't really understand how that happened either. I don't know that I'll ever be able to figure that one out. Maybe they tell you a little bit at the Ark how they think that happened. I don't know. But to me, that's one of the biggest things about this is not just the building of the boat, but how did all, yes.
When you're there and they have the crates lined up with the different things.
The pestilence. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Yeah. But how they all came there. It's mind-boggling to me. So just another thing that God provided. God did. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
It's amazing enough they could get 2 of every kind.
Mm-hmm.
But you skip to chapter 7, you find out that it's actually more included clean and unclean and some of it.
Right. And we're going to talk about why that was too. So that's an important part of it. Okay, I'm doing okay. So anyway, I just thought it would be kind of interesting to compare and just get a relationship to the size. And just really, when you start looking at it, you just see God at work in all of this for sure. So did Noah build the ark by himself? No? How do you think that happened? He had 100 years, or right at 100 years, to do it. Okay, son-in-laws. So there were 8 people, right, that were able to build, but still something this large. But it never says, the Bible never tells us that he built the ark by himself or that it was just his family, right? So people still had to work. People still needed jobs. And even though Noah was probably considered a little bit nuts for building this boat in a region that there's no way you're going to get that much. Yes? Oh, that there were rock people. Oh, yeah. So, of course we know how it happened, right? Right? Yeah. But feasibly, I think that people, they needed work. So nothing says that he didn't hire other people to help. But I read one article, even with just 8 people, that you probably could have built the ark with 8 people in 100 years. So either way, but I think it's kind of interesting. And I don't think that Noah was just like keeping it a secret while he was building either. He was telling people, I'm getting ready to do something that God has told me to do, and you should be getting ready too. And so I think that's something that we ought to realize too, that through the hard work that Dad was talking about, he wasn't just keeping it to himself. He was telling people about God at the same time. And this big monstrosity, how many people do you think came just to look at it? How many people go to the Ark Experience every year just to see it? A lot, right? Probably millions, I don't know. But people were coming, I think, to see what this crazy man's doing. So God gave him an opportunity to talk about God through this huge task. I think that's something that we have to realize too, is God gives us opportunities to work. He gives us opportunities to interact with people. And people might not understand why we want to be Christians, but we have the opportunity to tell them about God. So I think that's something that we can learn from Noah, is if we do work hard and we stay busy, we're going to have opportunities to talk about God. Y'all agree with that? Absolutely. Okay. So let's move on a little bit further. So let's talk about the flood. So it actually talks in chapter 7, starting at about verse 6. It talks about the flood itself. Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came on the earth. That in itself is amazing to me. And Noah had his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, as Ron was talking about, of birds and all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. And after the 7 days, the flood waters came on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day, all of the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Pretty amazing, isn't it? What were the springs, how's it put? The springs of the deep. What is that? Any idea? So not only was it raining, but there was water coming up out of the earth at the same time it was raining. So I did some looking because I didn't quite understand what the springs of the earth was and how that could happen. So a little bit of geography. Geography? Yeah, I think that'd be right. The middle of the earth has different layers, and they call them plates. And so as the water was coming down, God had the plates shift. And as they're shifting across each other, it caused geysers, great geysers, to come up from the middle of the earth. So there's so many things that are going on that have to do with the flood that we never think about. We think about the rains came down and the floods came up, right? It was as simple as that. It wasn't. God had his hand on this whole thing, and it was powerful. And I think we forget that. The power of God in destroying the earth is shown. And so one of the things, like I said, that happened is he caused those places to shift, and geysers, so great volumes of water. And we're talking about water that supersedes the height 20 feet of the tallest mountain. That's an incredible amount of water. And if God wanted it to happen from just rain, he could have, but he didn't do that. So a couple of years ago, Bethany and I went to the Grand Canyon, and we hiked down into it several miles. And we went with this couple of young people. It was called Canyon Tours. And they were creationists. And all the way down, we had little devotionals, and they showed us fossils that are in there. And one of the things that, science asks, is they tell us it took millions of years for the Grand Canyon to form. And you think about that, and if you've ever seen it, you think, how could this happen, in a short amount of time? But one of the things that they told us that I thought was really cool, and I never thought about, but when God caused the plates to shift and the geysers and the rain, it caused tsunamis all across the earth. And the tsunamis were continually, for this 40 days and 40 nights, was continually circling the earth. Can you imagine the power to cut that a tsunami has? I know we've had tsunamis, and we still get that phenomena, sometimes weather phenomena, but you could see when they pointed it out from different spots, how that tsunami had the ability to cut that canyon and be done during the time of the flood. Not millions of years, but in the amount of time it took to destroy that canyon was formed. That's just God's power. And I never really thought about how God did that. How did he make the Grand Canyon? Well, that's how. And there's proof positive to me of it. You see that. So another thing that God did that just during this flood that we don't teach our kids about, we don't talk to them about every single thing dying. We don't talk to them about that. But it's important for us to understand that God can do that his power is greater than we can even imagine. And if he wants to destroy us, he can do it because he did it. And he did it in a powerful way. It wasn't a gentle thing. Have you ever thought about that? The power that was behind destroying the earth and what it took? It amazes me. It amazes me. So there's different discussions about how long that he was on the boat. I think it tells us 150 days total. There was different things that back then that they used a lunar calendar instead of a solar calendar, and so the time was shorter than what it says, but that's not all that important. But what is important is in chapter 8, it says this: "But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded." So I found that kind of interesting. Did God forget Noah? If he remembered Noah, did God forget Noah? What do you think? No, I don't believe that at all. But yeah, absolutely. So in the Bible, when it says God remembered someone, what that means is that he never forgot them, but that he had extreme concern for them. And so he's telling us that the animals that were on there. So what that tells me is that God never forgot him, and he understood the circumstances that were happening on the ark. He understood the cramped quarters that the family was going in. He understood the cramped quarters that the animals had to live with. He understood the hard work that had to go on every single day for the family to take care of the animals. He understood all of that. He understood the horrific smell that had to be on that boat. There's no way it didn't stink terribly, even with 3 decks, and I know that God provided for feeding these animals and to take care of the waste. I know that he did that. But can you imagine being locked in with every kind of animal? The smell. God knew that, and he was concerned. So what that tells me is that if he was concerned for Noah about the conditions that he was in, he never forgets the condition that we're in either. Sometimes we have some pretty bad things happen. Sometimes this life here is hard. And we're thinking, where are you, God? Well, God doesn't forget us. He knows what our circumstances is, and he knows how much we can handle. He knew how much Noah could handle. And he was concerned for him. So what's he do? He causes the wind, and he causes the earth to come back, right? So I don't think we should ever forget that God remembers us. That doesn't mean that he forgets us, but that he does remember us. And I think as his children, he always remembers us. He understands our circumstances. He doesn't forget the things that we're going through. But he's going to provide. It doesn't mean that he's going to do it quickly. He never tells us that. But he always provides for us. Every time, just like he did for them. So that was something that really kind of opened my eyes when I was studying this deeper. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. What is that? Right.
If I picture myself in that time period, whether I have the belief in God or not, I'm also going to think this man's crazy if he's walking around talking about something that has never happened before.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have a hard time believing in him, even as a Christian.
Yeah. So let's relay that to what do people think about Jesus when he was walking around? Go ahead, Casey. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right. So that's a big part of the story as well. And then I'm about to run out of time. So he gets off the boat. God sends out the dove and just everything we read in the little story. But when he gets off, what's the first thing he does? Right. He built an altar, didn't he? Now, God knew what that was going to take too. He provided clean animals for sacrifice. But have you thought about this? Up until this time, mankind was a vegetarian. God didn't intend for us to eat meat up until this time. But he provided for man because he tells us that we have dominion over all the animals now. And that we can eat them, the clean ones. So God provided. He knew everything was going to be destroyed. All the plants were gone. They didn't have anything to eat except for now they've got animals. So up until Noah, we were vegetarians. I know it'd be tough, wouldn't it? I've tried that vegetarian way. It ain't for me. It's just not. So anyway, so that happened. But the first thing he does is he praises God. And then there's more to this story. We don't talk about with our kids the drunkenness that Noah succumbed to. We do know that one of the first things he did was plant a vineyard. So I guess he was kind of thirsty for some wine, because apparently he grew it and got. So we don't talk about the kids about how the earth was multiplied, because there's only 8 people left, right? So you can kind of figure out how that happens. But we don't talk to them about that. But the important thing was, through all of this, is that Noah did everything that God told him to do. And that should be a lesson for us. We ought to strive really hard to do everything that God tells us to do. And if we do, God is going to be with us, and he is going to make us successful, just like he did Noah. I know there's more discussion to be had, but it's time to stop already. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.